to start prescribing what redrawing of the blueprint of governance should be, it is important to start with the statements of some fundamentals. One of the first principles has to be to repeat the mantra so powerfully communicated by our new Prime Minister, the mantra of minimum government and maximum governance. It is one of those mantras which I happen to agree with. This requires massive self-restraint, especially for a state just beginning its new life. The size of the bureaucracy, the number of government departments, the number of government-sponsored or promoted institutions has to be really small. It would be wise to think of a law which limits the number of government departments to say a maximum of 10, and to make it really difficult to create new departments. But governments can be kept small only by massively devolving real powers of the government to local governments and communities. Panchayati Raj, in our case unfortunately, in most cases has not been seen as an exercise in governance. It has been seen as an exercise in the implementation of schemes designed by someone else. Panchayats themselves do not design schemes for their own people. They do not administer these. They only they get grants from some grant giving authority, and then they supposedly implement those schemes. So what happens that they merely become kind of franchise holders of a vast rent-seeking enterprise, and thereby become participants in the rent-seeking activities of the government and mafias which collude with the government. So you have decentralized corruption and you have devolved corruption. So for panchayats to become institutions of government, we need a major change in architecture. I would see this as a major challenge for the Telangana Legislative Assembly to draw up a new state Panchayati Raj Act, which should be one of its first major tasks. Now, several possibilities exist in this. We need to begin seeing district panchayats as full-fledged governments. Governments which have control over law and order and policing, which take all decisions relating to land, whether it be land use or pooling of land for public purposes, acquisition or alienation. The state government should limit its role to drawing up a framework law within which panchayats or governments take decisions relating to land based on regional plans which are drawn up through a participatory exercise and which clearly delineate which are the no-go areas and which are the areas which can be opened up for industrial and urban development. If one does this, one takes away one major area of rent-seeking from that of the state government and also the central government. Now, the role of panchayats also as governments needs to extend beyond land to the issue of natural resources. For a state as rich in natural resources as Telangana, such resources have to be seen not as a property inherited by the new government, but as a means of sustenance and livelihood for the communities in whose habitats these resources lie. These resources are commons to which these communities must have the first claim and must have a definitive role in any decision taken about how these resources are to be used. This again requires legislative action by which these powers are statutorily transferred to local government. Now, we have some good practices of our own in this country, and unfortunately these are not widely publicized. The government of Nagaland, for example, enacted a law called the Communitization Act, by which assets were actually transferred to communities. So the communities are owners of the land which they have, they are owners of the schools which they run, they are owners of the hospitals which they run. They actually own and control those things. They are not just merely operators, they actually own it by law. And therefore, the interest that they have then in ensuring that those organizations run, that the school teachers attend school, that the dropout rate is low, is high. And as a result of this Communitization Act, the levels of education, the levels of school attendance, the levels of health have gone up extraordinarily. Now, this is a kind of good practice from which we can learn, and certainly a new state like Telangana can learn, and see that the Panchayati Raj legislation is given a twist so that there is actual transfer of powers to panchayats. Local governments must also play the decision-making role vis-à-vis school education and primary health care. There is absolutely no reason why schools and primary health care centers should not be owned, controlled, and operated by panchayats and by parent associations. And even if they are funded by the state government with the allocation of being funds through the mechanism of the State Finance Commission, a role which one should enhance and expand, and the State Finance Commission should play a major role in how fiscal devolution takes place at the state level. Most state finance commissions have remained sort of advisory or recommendatory bodies with very little practical information. Again, by law, one can make it so that it becomes as powerful as the central finance commission. The cadres of teachers and doctors should therefore belong to district panchayats, and the role of the state government should be limited to being the setter of standards of accreditation and certification, standards of performance, and the designing of incentives and disincentives for these institutions to conform to such standards. I'd like to dwell just a little more on the issue of the governance of natural resources, particularly water and hydro resources and forests. Whenever we speak of development these days, the focus is on the economic exploitation of these resources and the appropriation of the returns from such exploitation, and not their conservation. We forget that the resources are finite, subject to depletion, and that the rate of depletion can become rapid with more growth and more intensive exploitation. This depletion can be such that it can destroy the very basis of the economic value of that resource itself. So what is the point of saying that you will use more water if water levels go down? Because then the very resource on which you're deriving the economic benefit gets completely degraded and so the focus is to shift to the conservation and the management, sustainable management of these resources. Now, this is what the unchecked construction of dams and hydropower projects in Uttarakhand, for example, has done. So we need to ensure that instead of trying to grab the maximum share of these fast depleting resources, all the stakeholders, governments and communities work together in partnership to see that more of the resource becomes available for future. Now in this context, it's very useful to look at the concept of payments for ecosystem services. These services, water, biodiversity, forests, are known as ecosystem services because these are the basis on which economic activity, especially in downstream states, takes place. So the economics of all activities depend on the health of these ecosystem resources. So there are now methodologies and techniques by which you can actually give a monetary value to the ecosystem services and work out a system through the aegis of the Central Finance Commission and through negotiations with, say, the downstream states of Andhra Pradesh and so on, whereby there is some way by which people pay for these ecosystem services. So then there is a vested interest of the state and the communities living there to augment these resources and to conserve them. So you get money for actually maintaining these resources because the health of the ecosystem depends on how the state and the communities act as custodians of these resources and conserve them. So we need to develop this kind of vested interest by which people are paid for keeping the ecosystem healthy, for retaining the health of the ecosystem, and treat them as caregivers. Just in the same way as you pay caregivers in a hospital, you pay caregivers of a community to say, please care for the environment and I'll pay you for this. And that payment will come out of payments which you get either through the aegis of the Central Finance Commission and this some part of it has already been done in the case of Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand and the rich forest areas where specific provisions have been made. So something similar to that can be done for Telangana. This is a particular passion for me, so I've been spending more time with it because I've done a lot of work on this for the Himalayas. And a note which I had prepared last year for the Himalayas for a similar thing has actually been incorporated in the BJP manifesto and hopefully might see the light of day with the new government. Now, something similar can be thought of for Telangana. Now, I just want to leave you with two other sort of first principles. One is the primacy of the role of women. I think women, in case of in governance, role of women is crucial, and women should spearhead and be the vanguards of the process of devolution of real governments to local governments. And this will bring an extraordinary degree of power to the movement, and it will bring a concern for natural resources, it will bring in compassion, it will bring tolerance, it will bring all the qualities with which we associate women. So I think women, devolution, and small governments are the three mantras which I would like to leave you with as forming the first principles on which to design new governance strategies for Uttarakhand. That's all I have to say. Hope I managed to spark some thought, and if I pass muster, you can invite me again. I'll spend more time. Thank you.